How's it going, everybody? Rob here, back for another video. And you know what? We're doing another reaction. This time focusing on a little bit of the Dishonored Wolf's content. At least the stuff he created before, you know, he left YouTube. But we got this archive, so that's really cool. This one is more focusing on Shadow of War. This was the sequel to Shadow of Mordor, which I will say, in terms of like a non-canon like side story to Lord of the Rings, or at least the Lord of the Rings lore, it's pretty interesting. I played the first game. I have not played the second game. I've heard mixed feelings about that one, but mainly because it's very like microtransaction-y to an extent. Like, you can't win unless you play microtransactions, which, I'll be honest, is kind of disappointing that, you know, games like that had to resort to that sort of shallow way of like trying to play beat a game. But anyways, so this is Shadow of Microtransactions, Battle for Feminism review. Oh joy, this will be, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this. Here we go. I feel like I should know this music. I feel like I should know it. Oh boy. Hypocrite comments? Okay. This isn't gonna be good. Oh boy.
Well, this is kind of awkward. While my thoughts and opinions of the base game Shadow of War are still exactly the same, I was sad.
I'm probably gonna need to see that review. I feel like I should be watching that before this, but like, I'll be honest, this was like the next thing on the playlist that I found with all of his stuff.
Really suckered into buying the season pass before I got to Act 4, you know, that 15-hour tower defense grind? And since I bought it, I figured I was obligated to play it. The Blade of Galadriel is the first of the two major expansions to Middle-earth Shadow of War. There's been a few DLC items so far, mostly just cosmetic shit like adding a new orc tribe that absolutely no one actually noticed or gave a shit about. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit interested in these DLCs, as it was still the same game, but different characters and presumably different abilities. I'm really looking forward to the Desolation of Mordor expansion, where we play as a regular human without powers, since that'll have an actual effect in the game if you die, but for now at least we have this. Blade of Galadriel picks up right where Act 3 ends, with Eltariel getting her fingers cut off and Celebrimbor getting absorbed by Sauron. Pretty gigantic plot hole in the game that was never addressed, but not super important.
Wait. Yeah, no, oh my gosh, I missed out a lot.
Yes. Anyway, this tells the story of what happened to Eltariel directly following that fight. Basically, her mission is to keep fighting the Nazgul and hopefully stop Talion before he becomes one of them. Yes, Talion is in this DLC, just not playable, which was a strange but somewhat welcome change, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. In the base game, Eltariel was just kind of bland, not a bad character necessarily, just nothing really interesting at all. The DLC makes an effort to flesh her out more, and while it's nothing spectacular, I will say that she at least seems like an actual character this time around. She still has the power of Talion's ring, so everything Talion can do, she can do, just without Celebrimbor inside her head. Instead, she has Galadriel talking to her in much the same way that Celebrimbor did with Talion, the two commenting on shit happening around the world. None of the dialogue between them is in the least bit interesting, which is a shame given how cool of a character Galadriel is. Eltariel also has the ring ghost thing that acts as a double block maneuver that Talion and Celebrimbor did, only it's just a transparent Eltariel instead, which is kind of dumb, to be honest.
Yeah,
she has
that is kind of dumb.
Why they just animate her turning around at the other? The story of this expansion is nothing special. If anything, this somehow breaks the lore even more and serves as a simple add-on to the base game. If you liked Shadow of War, then here's more of it. Many of your skills and abilities from the base game carry over to this expansion, so it's in your best interest to max out Talion before playing this so you'll be better prepared. However, despite having many of the same abilities and functions from the base game carry over, the devs clearly went out of their way to try and make her feel distinctly unique. All the usual animations animations have been completely redesigned to fit her combat style and appearance, which is a nice immersive touch that really is appreciated here. Eltariel also has her own light traps that she can use in a somewhat similar fashion as Talion's possession system, only instead of possessing them, it kills them in unique ways. What's really interesting here is that Eltariel is entirely against branding orcs, and aside from one standard siege defense moment, the DLC has her doing more unique actions that better fit her role as an elf assassin. This particularly stands out in a mission where you're taking Saragast, but rather than doing your typical siege, you have orcs distracting the fortress defenders while you sneak around and plant toxins that wipe out the fortress stealthily. While you do have the same fighting mechanics as Talion, stealth is a bit more useful in these bigger story missions. What's really cool about this DLC is the orcs themselves, who you have to convince to join you rather than simply branding them. This gives the orcs more personality, and there's even a point where you have to choose between two of your orc allies and help one or the other in a mission. That's
actually kind of cool. Because, I mean, with the original game, I mean, you force control over them. Whereas, like, and I guess they introduced branding in the next game, or the second game. I guess, and there was another mechanic where you will either torture or more so. I'm trying to think of the word. There was a particular thing where you shame the orc. I don't think that's the exact word for it, but it causes a massive like maddening effect or so on the orcs.
Something that the ads said would be in the base game but wasn't, and while it may be too little too late, I will say that the different take on the war here is actually pretty cool and makes Eltariel's quest seem different from Talion's. I was really impressed by the changes to the collectible skills and how they're all attained. Skills are still pretty much earned the same way, but they have vastly different functions than Talion's, allowing you to plant traps for your enemies, create shields to protect you from attacks, or fall back and regenerate your own health. Unlike the base game where all the armor and weapons were eventually tossed out in favor of whatever new piece you found, the DLC goes to great lengths to make sure that everything feels meaningful. Many of the Nemesis missions now rely on you attaining a certain piece of armor or weapon in order to effectively take on the next boss. This makes you feel like the bosses are all unique and need to be taken down in a certain way. While they're mostly identical to the ones from the base game, the effort to make your armor and weapons mean something important in every fight was actually very much appreciated, and rather than constantly throwing away the armor and weapons that had lower stats, I was compelled to keep them as they worked great in different situations. The final armor and weapons set in particular makes you feel like you really accomplished something, with all the hours of work you put into the game paying off with some genuinely great loot that the base game simply didn't have. With the expansion came an update that allows you to change Talion's skin in the base game back to his normal state, not the ugly one with the yellow eyes and the black veins all over his face, which was great because that was such a hideous fucking design. Where this DLC fails is exactly what the base game did, that being the point where you pay attention to anything happening in the narrative. Once more, the game goes out of its way to break the lore in every discernible way. I know this isn't canon, and I know the devs aren't trying to make it canon, but the fact that at every turn the universe is just thrown out the window for no reason just kind of bothers me. Remember Baranor, the black guy from the base game? At the very least, he actually had an in-universe canonical reason for his presence that made sense and was thoroughly explained in the dialogue and in the expanded info pages available in the main menu. Personally, I didn't mind that he was in the game, as he was given an adequate explanation and he was implemented in a way that I personally thought was okay. He wasn't an interesting character, but then again, who was? Well, if you hated him despite that, then you'll really get a kick out of the fact that two of the Nazgul are Asian women. Yep, they keep naming the Nazgul and now they're just, well, women.
Aren't they supposed to be kings, though? I mean, technically speaking, I mean, literally, like, the story itself says 9 rings were given to a race of men. 9 or initially it was 9 kings, wasn't it? 9 kings that were tricked by Sauron to be given rings of power, which inevitably were the rings for the Nazgul.
You realize the 9 rings were given to 9 kings, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, in one of those stupid fucking flashback sequences, it shows these 2 stereotypical Chinese women go up to the stereotypical Chinese land where it honestly looks exactly like fucking ancient China. I mean, I guess there's black people and white people in the actual universe established by Tolkien, so it's not that big of a stretch to think that Asians are there too, but the fact that they're so shoehorned into this expansion is honestly fucking irritating. Literally, the story behind them is that these 2 Nazgul want to usurp Sauron's stones rule and take over Middle-earth for themselves, which is also really fucking dumb. Anyway, you obviously beat them, and yeah, I'll admit that boss fight was actually pretty fucking well made. In terms of the central narrative divorced from the broken canon, there are
looks
some
like
cool
they use
ideas,
chain
but not
of
a
weapons
good
or
central
something.
story. The interactions between the orcs were the best part, as they had very well fleshed out personalities that made them stand out. The slow descent as Talion fell into the hands of the Nazgul was pretty cool until the end of the expansion broke the game's own story. This takes place like right after the final cutscene of Act 3, right? So we're talking a few days of time have passed thus far, and at the end of the expansion he becomes a Nazgul anyway, despite the final cutscene explicitly stating that he held off the Nazgul for decades more. Kind of a startling contradiction to its own narrative, but in retrospect not super difficult to believe given that the games do nothing but contradict the Lord of the Rings. The final boss fight includes you fighting Talion, which is kind of retarded given the fact that I distinctly remember Eltariel being incapacitated several times in the main game quest, so how she's suddenly able to fight the guy who had to come save her all those times is kind of bullshit. But hey,
yeah,
we gotta make sure we fit in that strong...
I mean, in that situation, I mean, like I said, I haven't played the game, but to an extent, I mean, if you have a story-wise, it would make no sense. But then again, I can only guess. I'll rewind in a second. But I would only guess, like, as you progress through the, you know, the DLC, more likely she becomes stronger, you know, and is able to, in a sense, match strength with Talion.
Final cutscene of this expansion is just spliced together pieces of the final cutscene in the base game with a different voiceover, which is super fucking compelling and definitely shows that they put a lot of hard work into it. Then it leaves off on a cliffhanger where Eltariel goes in search of Celebrimbor, which I suppose will either be covered in the next expansion or another game entirely. And that's, well, pretty much it. Narratively, the expansion is a fucking mess, which is pretty much par for the course at this point. There's no new areas, which is a huge disappointment since you're just retreading familiar ground, but on the upside, the changes to the combat and the much more dynamic orcs, better loot, and substantial changes to the way the game felt as you took control of a different character was actually pretty refreshing. I said it in the base game, and I'll say it again.
It does look good.
The Shadow of War is fucking excellent and an absolute blast to play. The Blade of Galadriel retains the fun style of swordplay while also giving players new abilities that make it feel more than just a tacked-on afterthought. The cutscenes are gorgeous, the voice acting was fantastic, combat is top-notch, and the refreshing mission design kept me invested until the end of the expansion. All in all, it took me about 5 to 6 hours to complete, which for $15 I'd say is right around the cusp of being just enough to be considered worth the asking price. At the very least, it wasn't a $25 expansion with 3 hours of content and a very slightly redesigned horde mode like the Halo Wars 2 DLC was. If you're worried about the microtransactions which infested the base game and was one of the many reasons why I couldn't in good conscience give the game a great score, there's no need to worry. Microtransactions are still present, but since there's no obnoxious 15 to 20 hour grind at the end of this expansion, there's no need to even look at the in-game store, especially given that the Nemesis system wasn't even really utilized in this DLC as it didn't serve much of a purpose for the story it was trying to tell. All in all, if you like Shadow of War, you're pretty much guaranteed to like this expansion, and it's enough to be considered new while also keeping it well contained with the Middle-earth game formula. Now we just gotta wait for the Baranor DLC where we won't have a ring or a wraith to help us pull off all these crazy tricks, and where we won't respawn at the nearest tower. Now that I'm interested in.
Okay, so it does sound like to him that the so-called DLC for what's it called? For the Shadow of War was actually sounds good, actually. I mean, he had his gripes, but at the same time, it seemed like he had some fun with it, for the most part. I still need to play Shadow of War. I would love to maybe, like, go back to playing the first one, Shadow of Mordor, just so it's on the channel, and then play some other, and then eventually play Shadow of War. But all in all, that may come later on. We'll see. But for now, yeah, no, this was a good video. I will say, like, Dishonored, a lot of stuff that, you know, that Dishonored has posted have either been really funny or very informative. And I will say, like, reviews like this are very informative. He really gives his own opinions on, what he thinks is, I would say, is the issues with a particular game, or what is, you know, worth noting. I will say, like, in terms of like the games itself. I mean, it's non-canon, so yeah. When you, as much as I wouldn't normally gripe about a female character, I will say, like, in terms of like story, you basically fuck up your own story, or at least kind of take a piss out of the initial story when you retcon what the base work has already established. But anyway, for now, I think that's all I need to say. But to everybody, thank you all for watching. Truly appreciate it. If you guys can, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you guys want to follow us on social media, it's all in the description down below, as well as check out our daily content and the weekly podcast. With that being said, this is Novakast signing off. Have a good one, take care, and I'll see you guys next video.